Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. I'm so excited to see so many faces in the audience. So excited that the weather cooperated with us. I got a little nervous on Monday when I saw the snow. So welcome, everyone. My name is Amy Levy, and I am so proud to serve as the Racial Justice Director for the YWCA Rock County. YWCA Rock County is a driving force for change in our community. For 100 years, our mission of empowering women and eliminating racism has been strengthened and tested. The charge of the Racial Justice Program is to foster an ongoing discussion in our community to provide activities and trainings focused on a range of topics pertaining to race, privilege, and human rights. This year, our Stand Against Racism campaign centered around a new theme: we can't wait, equity and justice now. Our country was founded on the idea of building a government of the people, by the people, for the people. More than 200 years later, this vision has yet to be fully achieved. Through generations of civil rights activism, have led to important gains in legal, political, social, educational, and other spheres. The forced displacement of indigenous peoples and chattel slavery marked the beginning of a system of racial injustice for which our country has yet to fully break free. The deep-seated systemic racism and inequities that disadvantages communities of color are still woven into the fabric of our institutions. From civic engagement to economic development, from education to healthcare, and even in the way people of color are portrayed in the media. We must work collectively to root out inequity in our communities and in the institutions that compose our society and demand justice and equity. That's why during YWCA's annual Stand Against Racism, we are rallying across the nation to say we can't wait, equity and justice now. Join us during this year's Stand Against Racism campaign and every day to bring awareness to racism within our communities and connect with other activists and allies to build pathways towards racial equity and justice. I am so excited, and we are all honored to hear from our county's equity manager, Dr. Atira Coleman, who graciously agreed to deliver our keynote address. Dr. Atira Coleman is the current Rock County equity manager. She engages with community stakeholders, partners, and residents to improve the county's influence in removing systemic barriers that negatively impact residents. Her diverse experiences include assessing and evaluating nonprofits and consulting with organizations on their diverse equity needs. Her expertise stems from years of programmatic work within departments of equity and inclusion research detailing the inequities within educational systems and the retrospective examination of how those practices have impacted the experiences of marginalized groups. Her work uses mixed methods approach to examine current and historical discriminatory practices that affect institutional equity. Dr. Coleman received her bachelor's degree in sociology from Beloit College in 2010 and a master's and doctorate in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Please join me in bringing to the stage and welcoming our equity coordinator, Dr. Atira Coleman.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's so wonderful to see all of your faces today here to gather to support eliminating racism and bringing equity to our county. As stated, my name is Dr. Atira Coleman. I am one of the Rock County equity managers. I started in December, so I'm still relatively new, but I'm so excited to be on board and continue the work of dismantling inequitable systems within Rock County. So why are we here today? As a sociologist, I have a keen interest in the structures, the systems, and the functions of our society. When I was asked to do this keynote, I did some research on the event, the mission, the intent. I discovered quite a few things. A few that I'll share is at the YWCA, they demand a world of equity and human decency. They will continue to get up and do this work until injustice is rooted out, until institutions are transformed, until the world sees women, girls, and people of color as equal, powerful, and unstoppable. This year's theme that was stated is "We can't wait, equity and justice now." Yet one of the more powerful things and more telling things that I discovered is that the YWCA's commitment to racial justice and civil rights runs deep. Since the 1800s, Black and Native women have been providing leadership to this cause. The 1800s, y'all. It is 2022. This makes this theme even more relevant. We aren't being pushy, we aren't being entitled, we aren't being radical to demand change and justice now. The most marginalized groups within our society have been fighting for liberation since the 1800s. It is time. But my sociological curiosity can't help but dwell on the why of it all. They have been battling these systemic oppressions that infiltrate all of our institutions, from schools to hospitals to our court systems. Why has more progress not been made with this fight? What has prevented this? That was my question. With Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s recent birthday a couple of months ago, my social media feeds have been lined with his quotes and his messaging around hope in the face of inequities. And I appreciate this messaging and people highlighting and framing of his work. But he was so much more than that. I'm drawn to Dr. King as an activist. While we all have hope and we all need hope, especially during these trying times, I'm inspired by how vocal he was about the urgency of change necessary to combat injustice. This quote of Dr. King comes to mind. He stated, "The racial issue that we confront in America is not sectional, but a national one. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and therefore no American can afford to be apathetic about the problem of racial justice. It is a problem that meets everyone at our front door." This is still so true today. If we say nothing or do nothing when we are aware of or witness obvious injustices, we are complicit and are guilty of condoning these injustices. Dr. King also stated that the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence by the good people. So a call to gaining equity and justice now is to speak truth to power, to demand a moral response to these problems. The phrase "speak truth to power" carries a connotation of bravery, of risking either the status quo or even one's reputation. But because the realities are, we are all active participants in these systems, and that can be scary. This work and the fear behind being actively a part of these systems reminds me of Plato's allegory of the cave. For those that aren't, familiar with the allegory of the cave, it's a sort of thought experiment. So if you can imagine that everyone you know and yourself is in a cave, but everything you need is in this cave. You have beds, a fire, food. Your life is this cave. Your world is this cave. Your reality is this cave. And every now and then, shadows appear on the cave walls. But the cave is all that you know. So when you look at these shadows, you don't see shadows. You think everything you're seeing is real. So when a bird flies by and you see the shadow of a bird, you don't think it's a shadow, you think it's a bird. When a dog goes by and you see the shadow of this dog, you don't think it's a shadow, you think it's a dog. That is your reality. And so you go on living in this delusion until one day you find an opening in that cave wall and you're able to walk outside for the very first time. At first it's jarring. The sun itself is bright, like today. You can hardly see, but once your eyes adjust to what you see, you start to see the truth. You see what an actual bird is. You see what an actual dog is. You start to realize this entire time you've been living in a cave. You run back to the cave to tell everyone you're excited. Your friends and family see you, and because you're struggling to see, because your eyes can't adjust to the darkness anymore, they think that wherever you've been has made you clearly delusional. You try to tell them the truth about the sun, about the birds, about the dog. You tell them that, hey, y'all, there's a real world out there. We are all in a cave. But they don't believe you. They are afraid of you. This story resonates with me to this work because this story is about trying to tell people about the systems of oppression we are all impacted by, but trying to tell it to people who are still fully plugged in and invested in these systems. Most people are very comfortable in this ignorance. They'll defend it. These systems are their reality. But these are the uncomfortable truths about society that are keeping us from truly making change. These are distractions. Distractions sometimes prevent the masses from seeking true liberation. Justice now means being able to identify and look past these distractions. What are some of these distractions? We have a habit of framing advocating for the most marginalized in our communities as political. This is a distraction. Food security, healthcare, housing for all is not political. These are human rights. And when we invest in a system that leaves the decisions to provide basic necessities to our brown and black communities as political, that is racism. Respectability politics is a distraction. Everyone deserves human rights, respect, and dignity regardless of how they walk, talk, wear their hair, or dress. We have become so comfortable, desensitized, if you will, to quickly justifying injustice. I think this is a psychological coping mechanism that we all use to kind of further remove ourselves from those being mistreated. This looks like saying things such as, it was their attitude that got them discriminated against, or it was how they dressed, how they spoke, or how they existed that got them discriminated against. These are distractions. Don't be distracted by these things. See them for what they are, which are insidious tactics that have historically been used to divide and conquer, enslave, and disenfranchise. The way we teach history can be a distraction. They say it is important to read and fully understand history because history can repeat itself. But the way we teach history is filled with distractions. It is a problem when slavery is taught as black history and not as white history. We have a habit of calling things a celebration of blackness when we're really creating narratives to make the majority comfortable. Celebrating blackness is speaking truth to power. As journalist and publisher Ida B. Wells has stated, the way to right wrongs is to turn the light on the truth upon them. Language, it can be a distraction. We like to skirt around the word racism a lot. We call it other things to make ourselves feel more comfortable. But what is racism? Let's ensure we're all very clear on what exactly it is. According to Ibram Kendi, an author, professor, and anti-racist activist, he states that racism is a powerful collection of racist policies, these policies that are led to racial inequality, but are substantiated by racist ideas, which then makes a racist anyone who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or their inactions or expressing a racist idea. This definition puts the work on all of us to intentionally express and support anti-racist ideas. We've all been distracted. It's easy because it's threaded into the fabric of our very society, a society that benefits from the disenfranchisement of black and brown people. This rally could be a distraction if your sole purpose is just to show up and not to use the lessons learned today to go and apply action for change. We, the collective we could make this inspirational move needed to make actual change in Rock County. We could actively support anti-racist policies through our actions and through expressing anti-racist ideas. But what does that look like? What is the work? Because I myself am not immune from needing to do the work necessary to see this change. These last couple of years through COVID have been a tragedy for many, but a larger tragedy is that it shined a light on the very real issues of racism in this country. I learned a complex lesson during this time. I learned that two things can be very true at the same time. I myself can actively work to dismantle racism, but still work within systems that perpetuate racist policies and procedures that disenfranchise racial minorities. Both can be true. This work is my passion, my vocation, the way I want to give back to the world. Rock County is still struggling like the rest of the nation with pervasive racial issues that impact our communities. There are racial inequities and disparities in our educational systems. We can see this with our test scores, our suspensions, our graduation rates. With housing and the disproportionate rates of the unhoused. Within our courts, with mass incarceration, healthcare from infant mortality to life expectancy, and I could continue, but these are perpetuated by racist policies. And again, I'll repeat, racist policies are supported by everyday racist ideas. And when I say racist, I don't mean in the sense of one person kind of pulling the strings and intentionally, making things racist, but I mean a community of well-meaning individuals who can't yet identify or who may even turn a blind eye to the inequities that continue to oppress our communities of color. So what I bring to the county, what my work wants to bring to the county is a paradigm shift. I want to dismantle these inequitable systems. I want to focus on a lens change. How do we all have a better understanding of our own positionality and privileges? How is one more aware of their biases and able to empathize with those whose identities they may not hold? Change can be difficult. We saw what happened in Plato's cave. People don't want to see it. But I'm interested in creating an environment where we can all learn and grow together. I don't want an environment where people are afraid to make mistakes because they're afraid of being called out. I want to create an environment where everyone has the type of relationship where they're comfortable calling people in to help us all learn, grow, and fight towards eliminating racism. My role at the county is twofold. I work on, one second. That person's really excited about eliminating racism. All right. My work at the county is twofold. I work on internal policies and procedures that the county is working on to create a better and more inclusive working environment. This includes things such as our recruitment, further diversifying our workforce, creating inclusive spaces so that we can retain good talent. Our onboarding processes, ensuring that everyone is provided the necessary support they need to thrive in their positions. And trainings, teaching people about the tools to develop actual effective equity change, and that's from staff to leadership to the board. But my focus is also on the external priorities. These include equitable access to all the services that Rock County has to offer, equitable treatment of our clientele, and community collaboration, which is this. But stating that DEI is a priority isn't enough. Just showing up today isn't enough. The creation of my position alone isn't enough. It is a good start though. I love my job. But y'all hold the power. Y'all have the ability to truly do the work to create a critical mass of anti-racist social change. An essential aspect of these plans is creating an infrastructure that supports these efforts. This is ensuring that leadership is operationalizing what we really mean by being an anti-racist institution. This is not siloed in just some departments or some offices. This is threaded through the entire county. This step is critical in creating an environment where strategic equity plans can be effective, an action that requires that everyone within the community knows their role in this work. But I can't do it alone. We must call in the systemic factors at play that benefit from our oppression. A friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Monique Liston, has stated that these systems were not created for some of us to survive. So we can't always think about the opportunities that the systems provide as the only way we can get closer to our own liberation. So what can you do? What can we all do? We're all witnessing these things, but the question is, what do we do about it? How do we make an impact? How do we become better agents of social change? This is a question I've asked myself for a long time. And as someone who's experienced inequities in many spaces and places in my life, I lean into this work by providing an outlet for myself to leave spaces more inclusive and equitable than I entered them. It provides me the lens that this work is not just about fixing inequitable policies and procedures externally, but it's also the internal work of unlearning misinformation, challenging stereotypes that we all have internalized about ourselves and others. Believe what is actually outside of the cave. That's a part of the work. Standing against racism now means standing against both the external and the internal threats. Calling in those that spew racist ideologies, but also identifying yourself and the thoughts and language and actions that you have that might align with those racist ideologies. Sometimes the hardest action is pausing and realizing that we all have some unlearning to do. Learning that there is a difference between feeling shame for the inequities that marginalized individuals face in our society every day. There's a difference between that and being shamed by those who are attempting to speak truth to power. We are all afraid of people calling us out, but who's putting in the work to not become so defensive when people are trying to call us in to learn about the injustices of the world? As we learn from Plato's cave, a shared delusion becomes a reality. So speaking truth to power is what we need for equity and justice now. We don't need more allies. What we need are accomplices. The term accomplice encompasses allyship, but it goes beyond to advocacy. An accomplice uses their privilege to challenge existing conditions at the risk of their own comfort and well-being. I hold many marginalized identities, and yet I can still recognize my privileges in spaces that I hold power. I hold power to enact change, correct history, call in misinformation to my friends, to my family, to my clients, to my colleagues. I have the power to be introspective, look within at the places and the spaces that I may be complicit in not actively fighting against racism. Use your power. Own your power. I feel as if we're living in a society that is striving to gain power, assert power, and feel powerful. Yet when it comes to making anti-racist progress, many suddenly don't have the power to enact change. As the American novelist and activist Alice Walker stated, the most common way that people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. Ask yourself, when is the last time you realized that a system or a policy used within a program, your office, your friend group, or even family was inequitable? What did you do to learn about that problem? What did you do to find a solution? That is this work. For some, this work will be about learning or unlearning. For some, it can be about broadening their perspective to have compassion and empathy for those that are different than themselves. And for some, it's throwing out the old playbook and creating new policies and procedures to bring us closer to liberation. But know that for some, it may be having compassion for ourselves. Compassion for ourselves as we enter into yet another year of living through a pandemic. We must ensure that we are taking care of ourselves and monitoring our own capacity so that we can maintain the strength to support others and be effective agents of social change. So I do thank you for taking the time out today to engage. I thank you for considering ways you can lean into this work. And as you listen to the rest of this wonderful program and hear the different ways you can engage, think about what your contribution will be. How will you work to see beyond the confines of the cave and social distractions to liberate those who have been fighting for this for centuries? Because before we try to change the world, we all have to figure out what to change within ourselves. So ask yourself, what will be your internal and external work to be an accomplice in gaining justice now? How will you do the work to take a stand against racism? Thank you.
Dr. Coleman, thank you so much for making yourself available to participate in this program, and thank you for that powerful message and the personal charge that was woven in there. I appreciate it greatly. So this in-person rally is the kickoff for our Stand Against Racism celebration. The city of Beloit has declared through official proclamation that today is YWCA Rock County Stand Against Racism Day. But it doesn't end there. Our Rock County Board of Supervisors, through proclamation, have declared Thursday, April 28th through Sunday, May 1st, 2022, Stand Against Racism Days in the County of Rock. Thank you to everyone who came down and participated, who filled out a sign with those personal notes about racial justice and equity mean to you. Thank you for allowing us to use that as we promote Stand Against Racism on our social media platforms. We're very grateful. Thank you for taking advantage of these gorgeous numbers down front. As many of you may know, YWCA Rock County this year is celebrating 100 years of continued service to Rock County. So I'm going to speak for our entire staff and say that we could not be prouder to continue this work and to live out our mission every day through service to our community. Part of our mission is empowering women, and we are so fortunate to have two students from a program that I love, the Fresh Start program at Community Action. This afternoon, we have Antoinette Thomas, who is on track to graduate early through the Fresh Start program. She loves listening to music and is passionate about spreading awareness about mental health. After we hear from Antoinette, we will hear from Jamari Jarrett, who is a recent Fresh Start graduate who loves to read and write poetry. And we are so fortunate that she is going to share an original poem with us for this event. They're a little nervous, so please help me in welcoming first Antoinette and then Jamari to the stage so they can share their gifts.
As a society, we are drowning in stereotypes and stigmas. I want help, but I feel like there's nowhere to turn. In my community, mental health isn't necessary, or at least care about it. And in society, I don't have a problem, I am a problem. People act as if mental health awareness isn't important, while over 20% of adults and 1 in every 4 of our youth are struggling with a mental issue. However, still only 4% of therapists are African American. As a young Black woman in society, the world looks at me and I look at it differently than others might. And with that being said, when I walk into a therapist or a counselor's office, I want to feel understood. And I want to know that my outlook is being understood from experience. I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands, of young African American kids who feel the same way as me. In the Black community, we already have so many stereotypes around mental health. So combine that with the lack of representation in the medical healthcare field, and it helps people be content with being uneducated on the topic. Many young Black children are left behind because as a people, we are comfortable with the labels society has put on us. We label our youth as argumentative or aggressive instead of passionate or strong-minded. That kid that everyone in the city knows that's always bouncing off the wall and has a hard time focusing in school may not just be bad. And that teenager who once was the most outgoing person you've ever met, but now never come out their room and is always alone may not have just changed because they got older. We need to start asking why. Why are our youth hiding? Why are we scared to talk? Why are we scared to speak up for ourselves? Even though it may be harder, we might not even like their response. We need to start somewhere, and that somewhere needs to be with a conversation and more representation in our communities.
When I look at myself in the mirror, can I tell you what I see? I see a Black woman strong as ever, not defined by her past, but who is determined because she sees her future. So when you look at me, what do you see? Some may say a loud Black girl who can't keep her mouth shut, and that's why I tend to speak quietly. But when you look at me, what do you see? Some may say a thug with no home training, and that's why I dress nice and talk proper so they don't discredit me. And when you look at me, what do you see? Do you see the beauty behind my Black skin and my hair, or do you see a threat underneath? When I look at myself in the mirror, here's what I see. I see a Black girl who has to work twice as hard to get what she wants, a Black girl who has to change her speech, change her stance, and most of all, change herself. Then, when I look at you, here's what I see. I see a world full of possibilities, and most of all, I see you. So when you look in the mirror, and when you look at me, all I ask is you please see me.
Antoinette and Jamari, thank you. Miss Stacy, thank you for bringing them. It takes a village, and I'm so proud that they were brave enough to share their voices. All right, so we have reached a part of the program where all who are interested can participate in saying the Stand Against Racism pledge. All right, we're gonna be very official. I'm gonna ask everyone who is able to please stand. And we'll recite the pledge together. Mindful of the continuing affliction of institutional and structural racism, as well as the daily realities of all forms of bias, prejudice, and bigotry in my own life, my family, my circle of friends, my coworkers, and the society in which I live, with conviction and hope, I take this pledge, fully aware that the struggle to eliminate racism will not end with a mere pledge, but calls for an ongoing transformation within myself and the institutions and structures of our society. I pledge to look deeply and continuously in my heart and in my mind to identify all signs and vestiges of racism, to rebuke the use of racist language and behavior towards others, to root out such racism in my daily life and in my encounters with persons I know and with strangers I do not know, and to expand my consciousness to be more aware and sensitive to my use of overt and subtle expressions of racism and racial stereotypes. I pledge to educate myself on racial justice issues and share what I learn in my own communities, even if it means challenging my family, my partner, my children, my friends, my coworkers, and those I encounter on a daily basis. I pledge with my means to actively work to support public policy solutions that prominently, openly, and enthusiastically promote racial equity in all aspects of human affairs, and to actively support and devote my time to YWCA as well as other organizations working to eradicate racism from our society. YWCA USA is on a mission to eliminate racism and empower women. I join YWCA in taking a stand against racism today and every day. Please take your seats. Thank you so much for making that pledge. Thank you in advance for living that pledge out in your daily lives, even when it gets tough. So we're doing pretty well on our schedule. We have arrived at acknowledgements and announcements. A huge heartfelt thank you to Randy, to Brent, to Michael, and the entire Rock County team for assisting with securing the venue and for the logistics of setting up. Thank you to our amazing speakers. Thank you to JATV for recording and airing the 2022 Stand Against Racism. Once we find out when it'll air, we'll put that on our website. Thank you to each of you for taking time out of your increasingly busy schedule because you believe that this was important enough to show up for. A special thank you to everyone who brought a young person with them. It just makes my heart happy. I saw a couple of littles playing on the yard, so just great. So, all right. Many of you scanned the QR code. That's going to take you to our website. Thank you to everyone on the YWCA Rock County staff who helped to put this together. Thank you, Carrie and Andrew, for putting together our resource page. It's going to give you lots of good information about local organizations who are working alongside YWCA Rock County to eliminate racism. NAACP Beloit Branch, Concerned Black Citizens of Beloit, Diversity Action Team of Rock County, Job is represented on there. There's so many great organizations because I hope what you're thinking is, what can I do next? So that resource page is going to help you to find out where you can plug in and engage. It has website information, Facebook information, email contact. Please reach out to these organizations and ask what you can do to amplify the work that they're already doing, and then share the work with your circle of friends and acquaintances. There are also podcast recommendations on there. There are book and report recommendations. I am going to give an overt plug for the Race to Equity Rock County report, which YWCA Rock County partnered with Kids Forward to create. So those are all there. The report is there for you to download and to view. So please use that resource list, create your own resource list and add to it. So we've arrived at the end of our programming. Please travel safely to your next destination. Thank you in advance for showing up today and for all of the work that you are going to do moving forward to stand against racism, knowing that this isn't just something that we come together and talk about and show up for at the end of April. So I'll play some parting music. If you did not get a chance to do a sign, we'll be here for a little bit longer. Please come down and fill that out. And again, thank you so much for your participation and for the work that you're going to do moving forward. Thank you, everyone.